In the Marvel Universe, the only one who can rival Iron Man in invention is probably the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym. This character first appeared in the 1962 Marvel comic, Tales to Astonish. Pym is one of the smartest people in the Marvel world and a founding member of the Avengers in the comics. In the comics, Ultron was created by him, not Stark. As a scientist, Pym discovered a subatomic particle that could shrink the body to the size of an ant. He named it the Pym particle after himself. Once he discovered the Pym particle, he immediately dove into research. The original Ant-Man suit was developed by Dr. Pym and his wife. This suit can change size at will using Pym particles, altering the basic structure of matter. As we know, the basic units of matter are molecules and atoms, and the gaps between atoms determine the density of matter. Pym particles can shrink the gaps between atoms to infinitesimal sizes, making large objects invisible to the naked eye. Its shrinking ability gives it a combat advantage. The suit's combat capabilities are limitless, depending on the user's ingenuity. The Ant-Man suit's technology is even more advanced than Iron Man's armor. Although Iron Man's suit is more comprehensive and convenient in battle, the Ant-Man suit has many extraordinary features. First, it can use Pym particles to enter the quantum realm, allowing it to shrink infinitely and travel through time. In any era, this is cutting-edge technology. In Marvel, flying and teleporting are common, but time travel is rare, except for god-level civilizations and timekeepers. The original Ant-Man was just an ordinary person, yet he found the way. Although Iron Man eventually achieved it, the foundation was laid by Ant-Man. In fact, from Ant-Man's name, we can tell that this suit's greatest advantage is shrinking, not growing. Back in 198, S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters was still under construction. Dr. Pym was working with Iron Man's father, Howard, and Captain America's former girlfriend, Carter. One day, Pym angrily told Howard, "It's one thing to treat me like an errand boy, but how dare you secretly copy my research and do it so poorly?" Howard replied, "The Pym particle is the most revolutionary discovery and should be used to serve humanity, not hidden away." Pym interrupted Howard, saying, "This technology could cause global chaos and should not be spread." Pym then stated that as long as he was alive, no one would get the formula for Pym particles. With that, he resigned and left S.H.I.E.L.D. The scene shifts to after Ultron's defeat, focusing on the film's male lead. Scott Lang, with a master's in electrical engineering, is a single dad fired for exposing his company's fraud. To survive, Scott turned to theft, using his engineering skills to excel. He snuck into the company at night, hacked the system, and refunded customers. Then, as a vigilante, he robbed his boss's house. But he overdid it, driving his boss's car into a pool, attracting the police. Scott was jailed. 3 years later, he was released, and Luis was waiting. Luis asked his plans. Scott said with his degree, he could easily be a manager, but even a waiter job lasted a day due to his record, and he was fired. His record made job hunting tough, so he stayed with Luis. Luis mentioned a big job to become millionaires, but Scott refused. From leaving prison, he decided to change for his daughter. At her birthday, his ex-wife's police fiancé looked down on him, and his ex-wife kicked him out. Without a job, he couldn't pay child support, losing visitation rights. After thinking, Scott decided on one last job to see his daughter. They planned to target a retired millionaire with a safe. Sources said the millionaire would be away for a week, the perfect time. That night, Luis brought tools, and they cut the signal, preventing alarms. Scott jumped the wall into the yard, climbed to the second-floor window, and used a device to disable the alarm. In the basement, he found a fingerprint lock. The team outside thought it was over, but Scott stayed calm. He opened a drawer, found tape, bit off a piece, and collected fingerprints from the doorknob. Then he opened the drawer again to find super glue and a key ring. He placed the key ring on the fingerprint. After applying glue and heating it, the fingerprint on the tape successfully adhered to the solidified glue. Then, fingerprint recognition was immediately attempted, but unexpectedly, there was another door inside. This door was made of the same steel as the Titanic safe. However, this didn't trouble the experienced Scott. He knew this material had a weakness. It wasn't very cold resistant. That's why the Titanic sank after hitting the iceberg. He then took out professional tools from his backpack, adjusted the angle of the drill, and started drilling. Next, he used a funnel to pour water into the door and then used liquid nitrogen to freeze the water. He laid down an air mattress and a big blanket to muffle any noise. All that was left was to wait. However, when Scott went inside, he found nothing but a bunch of bottles and an old motorcycle suit. It seemed like this was all for nothing. Scott calmly thought about what kind of clothes would need such a safe. So, he decided to steal the motorcycle suit. What he didn't know was that nearby, an ant with a mini camera was watching his every move, monitored by a wealthy man. Back home, Scott tried on the suit in the bathroom to uncover its secret. Surprisingly, it fit well. Then, Scott noticed 2 buttons on the gloves. Out of curiosity, he started pressing them randomly. Suddenly, Scott's body shrank to the size of an ant. The bathtub in front of him seemed as big as Pudong Airport. While Scott was puzzled, a voice from the helmet's headset suddenly spoke. It was the wealthy man. Before he could figure out what was happening, His friend Luis came home to take a bath. Scott waved his hands in the bathtub to get his friend's attention, but Luis couldn't see or hear him. The bathwater surged towards him like a massive ocean. The water washed Scott out of the bathtub, and he fell to the ground. Just as he stood up, he was nearly hit by his friend's belt. He accidentally fell into the drain, and through the pipes, he ended up on a DJ turntable at a bar. After spinning around, he was flung to the floor by the needle. He dodged giant feet with agile moves but was eventually kicked downstairs, landing on a carpet. He was then sucked into a vacuum cleaner by a cleaning lady. Suddenly, the vacuum got jammed, and Scott seized the chance to escape, quickly slipping through a door crack, thinking he had narrowly escaped danger. But, as soon as he looked up, a big black rat appeared. Scott took off running, jumped onto the rat's house, bounced out the window, and landed on a car roof below. Then Scott turned back into an elephant. After all this chaos, Scott decided he was done. That night, he returned to the rich man's house and put the clothes back in place. But when he came out, the police were already waiting outside. Scott quickly explained, but he was taken to the police station. A police officer came over and said Scott's lawyer wanted to see him. It turned out the lawyer was the rich man, who was actually Pym from the beginning of the film. Dr. Pym, disguised as a lawyer, met Scott. His appearance would change Scott's life. It was all a setup designed by him, as he valued Scott's skills and kind nature, so he deliberately let Scott steal the suit. Pym told Scott, "Now you either follow my next instructions or spend your life in prison." With no choice, Scott had to follow Pym's orders. Meanwhile, the tech company Pym founded was now taken over by his student, Darren. That day, Pym got an invite to visit the company again to see the current research results. Over the years, Darren used Hank's research data to develop shrinking technology, but made no progress. He even developed a wasp suit. Moreover, Darren wanted to create a wasp army for modern warfare. During the demo, someone raised doubts. To ensure his research went smoothly, Darren was willing to eliminate anyone in his way. Pym particles can interact with humans in liquid or gas form. If a person is exposed to Pym particles for a long time, their body will automatically generate Pym particles. However, Pym particles have side effects that can affect a person's physiology and psychology, causing immense pressure. Pym had multiple mental breakdowns. After his wife's death, Pym sealed away the particles, but Darren reinvented them and aimed to use them for military purposes, forcing Pym to find a new Ant-Man. To stop Darren's plan, Pym sought out Scott. In the police station, a flying ant landed on the cell door. Then 3 ants appeared on the cell floor. Scott looked closely and saw the ants carrying the suit. The ants pressed the activation switch, and the suit instantly enlarged. At this moment, the ants formed a countdown. Scott immediately understood and quickly put on the suit. Just then, an officer came to check the cell. Seeing it empty, Scott escaped from under the officer's legs. He ran through the door crack and reached outside the police station. Under Pym's guidance, Scott climbed onto a flying ant. Since Scott had no flying experience, he soon felt dizzy and passed out. When he woke up, he was at Pym's house, facing a short-haired beauty, Pym's daughter, Hope. Pym told Scott he had been watching him for a long time and believed Scott was the best candidate. Pym said if Scott helped him, he could reunite with his daughter. Scott promised he would never break into homes to steal again, but he was curious about what Pym wanted him to do. Pym then took Scott to the lab, explaining that 20 years ago, he invented a molecular structure that could change the relative distance between atoms, known as the Pym particle. However, this technology is very dangerous and could have dire consequences if it fell into the hands of terrorists. So, Pym kept it hidden for years. However, his student Darren heard about the Pym particle. After hearing the rumors, Darren became obsessed with the structure. Without Pym's support, he teamed up with shareholders to vote Pym out of the company. Now, Darren is slowly mastering the shrinking technology. Pym can't stand by and watch Darren sell this technology to Hydra, so he wants Scott to take over as the new Ant-Man, team up with his daughter Hope, infiltrate the company, steal the wasp suit, and destroy all of Darren's research. Once successful, he can legally visit his daughter. Scott agreed without hesitation. Next, he needed to learn how to use the suit. The next day, Pym first explained the theory and then started practical training. Becoming a qualified Ant-Man isn't easy. You must master the timing of size changes. Scott found the regulator on the axe cumbersome, but Pym warned him not to tamper with it. If broken, you might enter the quantum realm and never return. There, the concepts of time and space don't exist, and everything shrinks infinitely. Pym then taught Scott to control ants. With this electromagnetic wave generator, you can use brainwaves to control ants and influence their actions and behavior. This communication device can also tap into insects' sensory nerves, allowing you to perceive the world through their eyes and ears. Different types of ants have different functions and uses. After shrinking, Scott encountered a crazy ant with lightning speed and conductivity, useful for attacking enemy electronic systems. There are also bullet ants with strong bite force, topping the pain index. Next are flying wood ants, used as ground and air transporters. As for fire ants, known for biting, they evolved into excellent architects, helping with construction. Though often beaten, I learned a lot and got closer to Hope. Pym gave Scott 2 gadgets, darts to shrink or enlarge things. After training, Scott mastered the axe and ant control, syncing with them. Pym told his daughter the truth about her mom's disappearance. She was the Wasp. Years ago, during a missile mission, Pym knew shrinking to a molecular level was the only way to stop it, with no return. With Pym's regulator broken, his wife, the Wasp, didn't hesitate to turn off hers, entering a subatomic state to disable the missile, saving thousands. She willingly got lost in the quantum realm. For a decade, Pym tried to rescue her but couldn't find a way. Hope understood her mom's disappearance. Soon, Scott had to prove himself. His first task was to sneak into Stark's old base to steal a signal jammer prototype. Scott led an ant army into action. On the plane, he commanded the ants, and they jumped out at his signal. He rode an ant to the target, but Scott found Tony's old warehouse was now the Avengers base. Pym immediately, but Scott didn't follow orders. As soon as he landed on the roof, Falcon's sensors detected him. The Avengers were busy in Sokovia saving the world, leaving Falcon to guard the base. Discovered, Scott had to explain. He wanted to borrow the signal jammer and return it in a few days. Falcon reported the intruder, and they fought. Scott's training paid off as he used his shrinking ability to counterattack. The encounter with Falcon connected Scott with the Avengers and set the stage for Captain America 3. When Captain America needed help, Falcon recommended Scott. Later, Scott tricked Falcon into a warehouse, and while Falcon was distracted, he sneaked into Falcon's flight gear to sabotage it. Then, Falcon broke through the gate and flew out. Due to a malfunction, Falcon quickly crashed to the ground. Finally, Scott, who completed the mission, quietly escaped from behind him. After returning, Pym was very satisfied with him. They managed to borrow the disruptor without any danger. Afterward, the group allied to study how to crack the security system. However, Darren tripled the security and completely sealed all company entrances, filling them with sensors. Even the external vents were equipped with micro-wires. Pym was at a loss, but the clever and experienced Scott immediately thought of infiltrating through the water pipes. So, Scott called his friends for help. Pym was a bit worried seeing their unprofessional appearance, but there was no one else to turn to. After they devised a detailed plan, the operation to steal the Wasp suit began immediately. Scott shrank his body and entered the company through the sewers. Luis, disguised as a security guard, easily reached the control room. After dealing with the security captain, Luis began turning the valves. Lowering the water pressure, Scott rowed a small boat made up of an ant army, speeding forward. After a rapid descent, Scott reached the rendezvous point. A ladder made of oil and fire ants appeared before him. Scott grabbed the ladder and climbed up, successfully entering the company. Then, Scott controlled a bullet that flew to the security guard's neck, causing chaos. Luis, being strong, quickly took down the guard. At this moment, Hope came over and entered the main control room, then opened the control panel and inserted the disruptor. Meanwhile, another person entered the electronic board. With a command, he controlled the wild ant army to enter the disruptor. The minions formed a formation and extended conductive devices, instantly creating a powerful current that destroyed all electronic components. Then, with a sprint, they jumped onto the wooden ant and then passed through the lightning-filled gaps, installing countdown bombs at various locations on the equipment. On Darren's side, he met with the Hydra buyers. If they got the suit, the world would fall into chaos. Finally, Scott reached the entrance of the Wasp suit. At this moment, the suit was right below him, but there was a laser security net. At this time, the disruptor that Scott had previously stolen came into play. The partners outside immediately began hacking into the company's security system. The moment the laser net was turned off, Scott tied on a safety rope and jumped down without hesitation. Just as he was about to get the suit, little did he know he had fallen into a trap. The suit was instantly moved, and the king restored the cut safety rope, trapping Scott in a sealed chamber. It turned out Darren had long known about Pym's plan and set a trap. Darren always suspected Pym was hiding another suit and found out the new Ant-Man was Scott. Just as Darren was about to kill Pym, at the critical moment, Scott threw out a blue. After the dart escaped, Scott kept changing size, taking down the guards. Pym was shot by Darren. As Scott checked Pym's wound, Darren appeared, threatening Scott to hand over his suit. Scott didn't budge, so Darren fired, but an ant blocked the bullet. Darren fled with the suit, ordering anyone from the lab to be killed. Hydra's buyer took a Pym particle vial. Pym was only shot in the shoulder, not life-threatening. Scott chased Darren, easily defeating guards. Luis arrived, quickly taking them down. With Scott's bomb about to explode, they had to leave. Pym reassured Hope and took out a tank model keychain. Darren boarded a helicopter to escape, while Scott pursued on a chair. Darren grabbed a gun, firing outside, hitting Scott's ride. Scott switched chairs, approached the plane, punched through the glass, and shrank inside. Darren shot wildly. A building explosion destroyed Darren's work, enraging him. He donned the Yellowjacket suit to duel Scott. The suit was more advanced, changing size and firing lasers. They fell into a pool, startling BB Ching people. As Scott tried to retrieve the suit, police arrived and caught him. Darren escaped, breaking into Scott's ex-wife's house, kidnapping his daughter. Scott heard this on the police radio, put on his helmet, shrank, and flew out to rescue his daughter. Scott threw a dart, shrinking both him and Darren, battling fiercely again. To attack accurately, Scott threw a blue dart to enlarge it, but Darren headbutted it, enlarging an ant. Scott wanted to enter the Yellowjacket suit to sabotage it, but it was titanium, impossible to enter even small. Seeing Darren about to harm his daughter, Scott shrank to a subatomic level, entering the suit. The PIM particles in the suit broke, causing the wasp suit to fail. He defeated Darren and saved his daughter, but Scott fell into the quantum realm and lost consciousness. As PIM said, once in the quantum realm, you keep shrinking, and the glove button fails. In the dark, Scott heard his daughter's call. He remembered a blue dart that could enlarge him, so he took a chance to return. Scott placed the dart in the regulator and flipped the switch. Miraculously, he escaped the quantum world, and the mother and daughter reunited. To protect her daughter, she was willing to give her life. Maybe that's why her daughter always supported her father. No matter how others see her father, to her, he's always been the one she loves most. Afterward, Pym asked her how she escaped the quantum world, but Scott said he couldn't remember anything. Pym had to let his daughter take Scott away. Later, Pym opened the door and saw them having a moment. That night, Scott went to his ex-wife's house for dinner with his daughter. Her fiancé, Officer Paxton, told Scott he met Captain America. The captain wanted a jailbreak report, but with cameras blocked by ants and circuits destroyed, there was no evidence. Since he saved his daughter, Paxton reported Scott followed proper procedures, so the jailbreak wouldn't be pursued. His daughter was happy her dad visited and loved her new pet. Later, Luis came to Scott, saying the Avengers heard about him and wanted him to join. At the film's end, Drive. Pym shows his daughter an upgraded suit, made for her by him and Hope's mom. This hints that in Ant-Man 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp will team up, with Hope becoming the new Wasp.